Welcome back to Death Toll Racing. We're doing transfer case stuff on our Geo Tracker today. This will cross over, obviously, over to a Suzuki Sidekick, and then a lot of this crosses over to a Samurai as well. I am not the world's best expert on these things. This is my first go at doing this, so we're going to be learning this together, so hopefully I can make some mistakes so you don't make those same mistakes. What we're doing today is we're going 4-low gear change. So we're going to change from the 1.82s that come in those to a 424 Trail Creeper gear that I got from Low Range Off-Road. And while we're in there, since you have to do these kind of simultaneously anyway, so you have to take the transfer case apart for both these projects, we're going to be adding a twin stick setup as well. I also got that from Low Range Off-Road. They put together a really good kit, and I will show you those here right now. All right, guys, let's start off with the twin stick setup. So this is from Low Range Off-Road. It's a mix of the Wheelers kit and that trail gear kit. It's a very high quality kit, really, really good. The only thing, I wish I could have it in front wheel drive only in it, and it's that unfortunately that transfer case does not allow you to do that. I was hoping it would, and it doesn't. Otherwise, it's good. So the only thing you're really picking up is the ability to have it in 2-low. That's really about it, and that is still handy. It's just whether it's going to be worth $275 handy. That's up to you. The only problem I had with that is they give you Phillips screws instead of the socket head screws that they give you the socket for, so that socket was worthless. Okay, so these are the Trail Gear gears. These are 424 Trail Creeper gears, excuse me. It comes with seals, and it comes with the gasket maker, and that's it. Gears, seals, gasket maker. That is it. They have great directions online if you need it. We are going to be doing this a different way. We're not doing it the way they are doing it. I'm intentionally doing this without looking at their directions just in case I can figure out a way of doing it that's better than theirs. Sometimes when I read the directions, since I can usually figure everything out anyway, sometimes they'll lead you down to doing something a harder way, and that turns out to be very, very true here in this video later on. All right, so you saw me flash a stainless steel header up. We are also doing a stainless steel header on this, and we're also doing a rear locker. So those are going to be their own videos, so I just kind of give you a little sneak peeks of them here and there. That was the shifter, so you just push down on that lock ring that had those little cam slots in it and to get it out. That's how you do it. You just push down and twist it counterclockwise a little ways. It's pretty easy. You don't need any tools to do it. All right, guys, so I am going to fly through this on some of the more basic stuff so that I can, give a little bit more detail in the more complicated areas. This ends up being kind of a long video. It's about 30 minutes or so, and so I really have been trying to cut down on a lot of the more basic stuff. Here I'm just putting a rubber mat in between the oil pan and that rubber mount there, and then between the diff and the oil pan on the front side, and that's so when I take the transmission out, the motor will just sit on those. It sits pretty balanced on the motor mounts, but I don't really want to tear the motor mounts or anything. One of mine's already tore, so one, I don't really 100% trust it so the motor doesn't just fall out of there. But two, you don't really want to overstress them anyway. I'm taking out the starter. The starter is probably the hardest part about this project. So if you can change a starter, you can probably do this project as long as you're patient enough to deal with the inside of the transmission. Transfer case, I guess. Austin. Ready to lift?
Alright, what's the plan?
The dumb end or the easy end?
You got any gloves? This thing is greasy as shit.
These ones?
Yeah.
I got 2 pair on.
Do you really? No. My last 2
My
pairs.
hands are a little sweaty.
You've had an extra set of gloves this entire time?
Yeah.
We're in the Rockies. Oh, look at that little bell house.
So this should be the dumb end.
Uh-huh.
So what I was going to do is hold this up, and then you can get rid of this thing.
Okay.
Probably just pull it.
Sure.
And then we'll come back. It's really heavy, so
yeah.
I'm sweating.
I can see.
I can lower the lift if we want. I think it won't be that bad. Okay, so I took it up and Akila wasn't home, so I went ahead and stuck it in the dishwasher, and it came out pretty good. So now we got to figure out how to get this thing apart. So it's not as easy looking as a traditional transmission transfer case like I'm used to, but I imagine you just take the bolts off around this unit, and then it'll come off that way. I hope that's what you take off, but we're going to find out. I didn't do any research on this intentionally, just so if I run into problems, we both run into them together. There is a bolt on the top behind the shifter, the transmission shifter, right here, that we'll have to take out, and I'm hoping we can slide this out from under it. It's not actually a sealed unit, but it does look like it might be kind of difficult to get this out. We may have to take this whole shifter assembly off. All right, spoiler alert, you do have to take the shifter off. There's a bolt underneath it. You saw me take it out right there. All right, guys, I've been fighting this. It's coming off, but it appears to be stuck on the splines. And I know it's just a matter of slipping it off, but it is extremely tight on there for some reason. But it is coming, it's just really, really slow. There was no seal on this, so I think some moisture got in there. There we go, it's coming now. There we go. Just a little pile of grease from them putting it together. It was probably supposed to be on those splines, but for some reason it was in the bottom of the transmission case. So that was, I'll bet, was supposed to be coated on there, and the guys in the factory, when they assembled it, went and just missed it and went down there and they stuck it together. And so yours probably won't be that hard to take off as long as they got this little pile of grease actually on that shaft. All right, so.
Hey, babe.
Hey, yeah.
What'd you put in my dishwasher?
Dishwasher?
Yes. For dishes.
I don't know. It was Austin. Austin did it. He said, asked if he could borrow the dishwasher, and I said he could borrow the dishwasher. So.
I don't remember seeing Austin come to the house anytime recently.
Oh.
Was this in my dishwasher?
No, I didn't put this in the dishwasher. Why would I do that?
It looks pretty clean.
Oh, yeah, it did work pretty good actually.
So I'm getting a new dishwasher.
So I'm just going to take all these 12 bolts out, including this one, which is actually retaining this pin. But I'm going to leave the pin in there. I don't want to try to pull it out. And we're going to try to just take this end off, and I'm going to see. I'm hoping that we don't actually have to split the case down here, that we can do everything from this side. And it's possible that that's going to be the case, but it's not a certainty. So that should just pop off of there. Yeah. And the rest of these should come out. Hopefully they're all the same, so we don't have to figure out in order, but we'll watch it on the way out. And yes, those bolts all do end up being the same size. So I hit the mount bracket to get that apart. And I see our little low range gears already. So this might not be too bad. I see some roller bearings, so hopefully those don't give us fuss. This pin right here is what's holding this thing from coming apart super easy, so I'm going to try to wiggle that off of there. There we go. It shouldn't take brute force, it should just take finesse more than anything. All right, you recognize those gears. Those look awfully familiar to the gears that we just got. Okay, so let's take these guys out right here. And then there's a rubber plug up top, and that must be for servicing that shaft. Comes through, and then there's a rubber plug up here. These are probably detents. There's probably going to be a spring and a ball in there, I'm guessing. So far, 14 is close. Yep. So you can see the spring in there, and then there's going to be there should be a ball in there as well. So I'm going to take out the roll pin in that square block there, and my hand's blocking it so you can't really see. But we'll be getting back to that when we slide it off, but I knocked the roll pin out of that part right there. Alright, so what I just put a random nut down there, and I'm going to tighten that nut onto it, and that's going to hold the shift shaft from being able to slide. That way I can pry that block off the end of it. That's a pretty handy trick that I just came up with on the spot right there, but that worked pretty well. There's the nut, I just took it out. Again, just a temporary thing. Alright guys, so this is where I am going to vary quite a bit from the directions that I've looked at now. They have you taking the case the rest of the way apart and the bolts on the other side with the with the chain and all that stuff, and pressing all this apart. It's not necessary. It comes apart fine without, so you can do it this way. So this is going to be a huge time saver, and also I never use a press on this for this entire job, so that eliminates needing a press. As I was taking it apart, there is one thing that I didn't notice that was very important. And inside here, this is where that shift shaft came through, the one that we had to knock the roll pin off and then we slid it out. There's a ball that goes in between this shaft and this shaft. So once you get that out, you can get that ball out of there. I didn't know it was in there, so it ended up falling out. It's okay in my situation, that ball could have rolled away and I never found it. Would have been fine, because now that I'm doing the twin stick, you don't put that ball back in. But if you're not doing a twin stick, you have to be able to put that ball back in there. So when we get to the twin stick part of it, I'll cover that one again. But for now, we're going to get creative and make a dam out of foil, mark this thing out, and get to grinding on this case a little bit with a die grinder. And then we also have to clearance it in here for the next gear, but we'll get to that here in just a second. Alright, so I'm just going to mark where the depth of that gear is. I am putting JB weld over the two valleys that we needed to grind, so that if we do end up getting kind of thin there, it'll just help reinforce it a little bit, but mostly just help it so it doesn't leak. If the aluminum were to crack a little bit under there, but that'll hopefully also help it from cracking. But I wouldn't want to count on the JB weld for doing too much. That's not something that they tell you to do in their instructions, but it's just something it makes me feel a little better doing it that way. All right, and so I'm going to do this a few times where I'll test fit it, clean it out, and then I'll end up grinding it again. I'm using WD-40, and I just use it very, very heavily to flush everything out. So I'm spraying it always so that the flow of WD-40 is pulling the chips out. I'm not blasting at the chips, pushing them farther into the case. I'm pushing them on the backside so everything will flow out. So that'll get everything out of there. That thing ended up being perfect. I didn't get any chips in there at all. So this gear here, according to their directions, you have to trim quite a bit. But I put it together and mocked it up and stuff. It barely rubs just on one little lug. So that's all we have to trim, and I'm going to do that here right now. All right, guys, this is a copper hammer. If you don't have one of those in your shop, get one. They're very, very handy because they won't dent anything. They get dented. The part that you're hitting doesn't. And then this snap ring that I'm working on right there, that thing, I don't know why, but that was a pain in the butt to get out. I cut out some of the video of me trying to get that out. It took me probably 5 minutes to get a snap ring off. It was really dumb, and I was starting to get frustrated with it. And you'll see me, those gears come coated in Cosmoline. That WD-40 gets the Cosmoline right off. So I like doing it that way instead of using like a brake cleaner and something on it. I'd rather use WD-40 to get everything off. It just kind of breaks everything down so you can get it off good. These seals, the seals they give you are crazy soft. You can actually push them in by hand. You don't need to drive them, which is really nice too. I also put Vaseline on everything as I reassemble it. That will keep the seals and everything so that they at least have some lubrication before. But any Vaseline that gets in the gear oil will dissolve. And so that's really good in automatic transmissions and manual transmissions for putting stuff together. It holds real good, but then it just dissolves and goes away, unlike grease, where grease kind of just, when you take a transmission apart that someone used grease in, it tends to have clumps of junk, of goo inside there where that grease kind of settles out. A perfect example of that is if you ever service a full floater rear end. People always pack the bearings on those, and they're not supposed to be packed. But they'll pack the bearings with grease, and then you can see that science experiment that happened in those bearings from all that grease and gear oil mixing together in a full floater. If you've ever serviced one of those, the bearings on one of those. So as I've been blabbing away, I've been using nothing but sockets for my drivers. I'm trying to use just all super basic tools to do this. So far, well, in the end, I can just spoiler alert it. I use nothing special. That little battery die grinder I liked a lot, and the main reason I like it is because this is really important. So take note of that direction shaft and shift sleeve. That is not symmetrical. That shift sleeve is not symmetrical, but it'll fit both ways. So you unfortunately probably wouldn't notice until you got it all the way assembled if you put it in backwards. But anyway, that electric die grinder, it's a Milwaukee 12-volt die grinder. It is really nice because it doesn't blow air, so it's not blowing the chips around as you're cutting. As you saw, they were all just kind of laying right there. It's really, really nice for that when you're trying to stay clean, like when you're grinding on the inside of a transmission. But anyway, we're already getting back together now, and it's easy from here on out, as long as you pay attention to how it goes together, or just refer to this video, taking it apart and putting it together. It is not challenging. So now I'm getting into these switches. These switches, so where I have it placed there now, as it says on the screen, that will light up if you have it in 4-low only, or in low gear only. It'll light up the 4-wheel drive's light. If your rig had 2 switches back there, then you have a 4-low light and a 4-wheel drive light. My vehicle only has a 4-wheel drive light, so it's going to light up depending on where I put that hole. So in that position, off to the side, it'll light up in 4-low. If I put it up top, which I'm going to do here in a minute, it will light up when I have the front axle engaged, basically, with the twin stick setup. All right, and I'm actually going to put grease on the shafts instead of just in the bottom of the case like the factory did. And I am going to seal this, and this is 100% optional to seal it. I don't know. I don't think it's optional. I think you should seal it, but you don't necessarily have to. The factory doesn't, and there's technically no oil or anything in there. But I don't want water in there, so I'm basically sealing water out from getting in there. But then you just drop your transfer case on. I found it stands on that little. It's like a Harbor Freight stand with the two studs on the transmission. It stands on that very, very good. Just the way I have it there. I wish I would have taken it apart that way, because that would have made it a lot easier than trying to do it on a bench. But other than that, now we're just bolting that together, and then we're going to install the thing. Oh, and before I can install it, I forgot, when we were taking it out, we kind of ripped one of the wires off the sensor. So what I'm doing is I'm just grinding out the epoxy around the wire, and then we're going to solder them back on. It works pretty good. It will never fail again there. Well, I mean, it could. You could rip it off of there again, but that'll last just as long as it did the first time. All right, here's a little fix. So all the switches on the transmission and transfer case are the same switch. I broke a wire off when I was getting that out of there, because I didn't realize that I had two switches on the transmission. I thought I had one, so I only unplugged one of them. So when we were pulling it out, we pulled the wire off. I'm just soldering them on. So I just used a die grinder and ground down a little bit so I can expose some wire. The wire is still insulated going through the epoxy. So I just put some flux on it, tinned it, then tinned the wires, and then soldered them together. And that'll last just as long as it did the first time from the factory, until I forget to unplug it again and put it in. So here I'm doing the throwout bearing, so grease everything up on it. I even greased the splines of the shaft going into the clutch, and definitely the pilot bearing. That part of the shaft, if you can get grease into your pilot bearing on the engine itself, that would be good too. But just make sure everything works good, because you would hate to put that thing in there and then have to come back and fix it.
Yeah, boy. Fucking close. I thought they were like are these studs?
Those are studs.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I saw them hanging out, and I was like, oh, that'll be easy. I'll be able to just thread them in.
Yeah, I think it's just like the pilot bushing.
Yeah, that's true, right.
There it is.
Oh, it's all the way in. Look at that. Looks like we've done that before.
I have one.
A glorious little product. Best thing the GM ever made.
You know, it is kind of a shame that they didn't do more with it.
I know, right? Imagine if they would have continued.
Well, and the thing is, so they ran vent lines all the way up. They did all this shit like they meant for this thing to actually go off-road.
Yeah.
But then they just girlied them up.
Yeah.
And I guarantee the people who designed this thing were like, dude, what the fuck? We made this thing to go off-road. Like, you just made it totally sissy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this thing totally competes with, like, the Samurai.
Oh, I would love to get a Samurai into a side-by-side.
People talk so much shit about not having a straight axle, but
Yeah.
I bet if you side-by-side them.
I might try to find one just so I can do the exact same shit and go side-by-side and be like...
They're probably equal.
I think this will do better because it's going to flex better. It's not leaf spring.
Yeah.
The side, you know, so...
Yeah, especially with the way that goofy control arm is in the rear.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get
See ya.
All right, so there was some real shop talk, the history of a tracker. No, I really do think that the tracker was originally intended to be an off-roader, and then it just kind of got into the weird marketing thing in GM, and that's when they put on those bumpers and everything else that just made them look like little cars, and they kind of just lost the appeal of being an actual capable off-roader, especially an inexpensive. These were very inexpensive vehicles now and then. So I'm going to modify that shift boot a little later, but here I'm going to trim for the twin stick. It does not fit through the factory hole. So all I did, I traced the ring that goes around the boot, the twin stick boot. I traced the inside of it on there, and then I'm just cutting it out with a body saw. The metal on these are very, very thin, so they cut easily with a body saw. And if you're really careful, you can do pretty nice cuts with them. The problem is the hole is longer than it needs to be, so we're going to have to patch that in, and I'll show you how I chose to do that in just a second. So I'm going to use my go-to inexpensive sheet metal, and that is a license plate. So I have a few of those laying around. So I'm just going to trim a license plate to fit the back side, and then we'll nicely mount it in there and then get our boot and everything mounted up. All right, so I'm going to temporarily screw it in with some sheet metal screws. One of my pet peeves is sheet metal screws sticking through the floor of a car or anywhere on a car where you can touch the back of the screw. So I'm going to replace those with nut inserts, but this is a great way to get everything started and positioned and stuff with sheet metal screws, and then you just use those holes as pilots for your thread inserts. All right, so the twin stick setup is actually kind of a pain to put on, even through that hole. Unfortunately, that's as big as you can cut the hole, or the boot wouldn't fit on it anymore. You can't really put the transmission transfer case in with the stick sticking off of it, so you're kind of just stuck having to fight it. For some reason, my transmission was sitting off to the side, and then I'll go under it here, and I'm cutting that out of the video, but I'm just shifting everything to the left so that ends up being centered in the hole. But I noticed that when I was putting the shifter in, and I even noticed it from underneath that it seemed to be shifted off to the passenger side, and that's all kind of adjustable within the play of the holes. If you loosen everything up, you can kind of shove it over and tighten everything back down. Okay, so I have not researched this as to why, but I believe the directions are a little bit wrong. They may be taking something from a Samurai and applying it to a tracker or something, but the left stick does four-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive. Pushing it forward is four-wheel drive, pulling it back is two-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and then the right stick, putting it forward all the way, is low gear. In the middle is neutral, everything's in neutral, and then in the back is high gear. The discrepancy comes where they say they're supposed to be on the left stick, they're supposed to be neutral in between four-wheel drive and two-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and there's not. There's definitely two positions, one's in four-wheel drive, one's in two-wheel drive. So I don't know where the discrepancy is there, or if I'm just not feeling that middle detent, but I have two definite detents all the way up and all the way back. There's nothing in between. So, you know, it is what it is. So I am installing the rear driveline, and this is actually a cheater. I have had that rear end apart, and I put a locker in it already, and I also have the header installed on it, both of which are going to have their own episodes. I'm installing the 8090 gear oil now. It's a full synthetic gear oil in the transmission and transfer case. You got to fill those separately. And it doesn't take a lot. I'm on running off a 5 gallon on a pump, so I'm not sure how much it actually took, but it wasn't very much, maybe 3 quarts and 2 quarts or something like that. But here it is, open header. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We got 3 videos coming out really soon on that thing. Just as fast as I can get them edited, I only have to do a little bit more work. But there is the header, which you just saw a sneak peek on, but we got to finish the exhaust on it. And then we did a rear locker install, so that video will be coming out soon as well, and that's already done. We also have some skid plates going on it, so those are going to go on there, and you'll get a video on that. And then hopefully following that up is going to be the testing, where we're going to try to make it up that hill that we couldn't make it up during the suspension testing. So we'll see you again real soon.